Well, hey everybody. Your old buddy Michael Reno back with you, and as always, thanks for tuning in. You ever pass by an abandoned old house and start wondering what its story was? There's a place like that I haven't thought about in years, where I grew up in East Tennessee. We lived out on the west end of my hometown, Morristown, Tennessee. There was our backyard and McIntyre's little field that was one lot wide, and Virginia Avenue, in the middle of Virginia Avenue, was the city limits of our little town. I lived my backyard and one vacant lot from being in the country. And from there on, it was just farmland. We raised horses, Tennessee walking horses. That's what my dad was into. That was his thing. I never cared much about them. I wanted to be a cowboy. So I always had a quarter horse. And we'd have literally 40 or 50 Tennessee walking horses. We had brood mares and stallions and show horses and the whole bit. And we rented a place about, 5 miles maybe from where we lived. It was part of what had once been Neil's Dairy. As a matter of fact, I worked there in summers putting up hay just at the very end of the dairy operation. But we would pass a place on the way out there, a little 4-room probably house made of stone, but it wasn't made of typically crab orchard stone or limestone like most stone houses were. Not that there were many stone houses in that part of the world, but it was made from river rocks, round river rocks that whoever built it had pulled right out of it was a good-sized creek that ran into the property there, ran by the property. It's hard to build a square house out of round rocks, but whoever did it had done a beautiful job. It was a nice little house at one time. But when I was 10 years old, I'd pass that place and wonder what had happened to it, because when I was 10 in 1958, that house was already abandoned. The roof was falling in, and trees were growing up in the pastures around it. But right behind the house, not far, was what had once been a dairy barn, a small dairy operation. And you can tell from looking at it, or could tell from looking at it, that at one time it had been somebody's pride and joy, because the barn was old and falling in, but you could see up under the eaves that at one time that old barn had been painted white. Somebody took a lot of pride in the place. And I remember as a kid thinking, I wonder what happened there. And I asked my dad, I said, do you know anything about that place? He hadn't paid it any attention, I don't imagine. He said, no. Looks like somebody had a nice little dairy operation there at one time. I sort of forgot about that place for years and years and years. And then, coming up here every day and working on stories and songs and trying to come up with ideas for something to write about, I started thinking about abandoned houses, and that place came to mind. And it's like I could see it all over again in my mind. I don't know what the story was. Couldn't have been a big family. It was an awful small house. But somehow I started forming this story in my mind. I could tell you the story, but I'll just sing you the song. 7 Guernsey cows gave milk 2 times a day, back when that rundown barn was painted white. And a little 4-room home built of river stone shone like a penny in the morning light. But if you see it now, you'd probably not look twice. Beyond the dairy barn, to the far end of the farm, past the hay fields and the apple trees, in a 7-acre field there along the creek grew the finest stand of corn you'll ever see. The cornstalks dancing slowly in the breeze. One man and a mule did all there was to do. Together watched the seasons come and go. I can see the old mule now, steady on the plow. The old man prayed the corn was gonna grow. He'd shout amen at the end of every row. Evenings with his fiddle, he'd sit out on the porch, the crickets singing as he sawed away. He'd smoke his pipe and gaze out where the cattle grazed. The mule would nod, the corn would start to sway to the fiddle at the closing of the day. Honeysuckle roams around the old man's home, the red fox and swarms of honeybees inhabit that old barn on the little farm, where the finest stand of corn you'll ever see stood slowly dancing in the evening breeze. And that's the story of the little farm with the river stone house. As always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you as soon as we can get back out there. Y'all take care of one another. And if you get a moment, reach down and hit that subscribe button. If we can get to 1,000 subscriptions, we can do some special things for you. Who knows? Maybe we'll make it. Thanks.